Welcome to Life Planning 101, brought to you by Kennedy Financial Services of Eastland. Tune in every Monday morning at 8:30 on KATX and KWBY, and again on Saturday morning at 9 on KATX and KWBY as Angela Robinson joins Terry Slavens to share important financial information to help you live life on purpose. Insurance, investments, estate and tax planning, and much more. All covered now on Life Planning 101.
And welcome into Life Planning 101 right here on KATX KWBY. Terry Slavens back with you after a week off, and for the second week in a row, no Angela, but we have Jim Kennedy. Good morning, Jim. How are we doing this morning?
Good morning to you, and hello to everyone out there. And doing great. We're looking forward to a big week this week.
Very exciting week. A lot of kiddos graduating. We had Mr. Cochran in this morning. He said the seniors paid a visit to his house last night and invested in some toilet paper and saran wrap.
Well, we don't want to lose that tradition, do we?
He took it all very well, though, and it is a big week, graduation week. But today it's Life Planning 101, and a very, very relevant subject we're going to talk about today, beneficiary designations, how you can pass things on with the least amount of cost, avoid probate, etc.
Yeah, and I'd like to say congratulations to the seniors. Went to baccalaureate last night, and of course my granddaughter's graduating, and beautiful young ladies done really well. But I just look out there and see all those young men and young women, and I just like to give a piece of advice out there. So don't let anybody tell you no. You know, whatever you dream, whatever you think of, whatever you want to do, you're the one that knows. And I just really encourage you to reach out and find that and work toward that. And one other thing I've always lived by, I used to be a big Zig Ziglar fan, still am, and listen to miles and miles of road studies that back in the day. But I heard this when he said it, and I've stuck to it all my life. But the way we get ahead in life is a little different than what we think sometimes. But if you just help enough other people get what they want, you'll get everything that you want. So hopefully someone will remember that and live by those words, because it's just if we stay focused and keep the good Lord in our midst out there, working toward that, and just helping others, we will get everything that we want. But don't let anybody tell you no.
Don't let anybody tell you no. And something that I have lived by here at the radio station, and to this point it has worked out. As a business owner yourself, we get asked to make donations to lots of things,
yes,
and always glad to help support. But for every dollar I give away, I feel I get two back eventually.
Yep.
And
right.
And thus far, that's worked for me. So
that's good. It's nothing wrong with giving. So today we're going to talk about beneficiaries passing things on, and I'd like to just start out by saying, when you talk about planning, this is one thing you probably don't want to do the job alone, because we've mentioned this, I know, a number of times on the show, but when you go through life, you're doing it one time. This is your first time in lots of cases, and you think what your neighbor said, your parents may have said, your cohorts at work say, or what you read in the newspaper is good for you. And that's not the case in most situations. And I encourage you to have someone to help you with that. As a financial planning firm, we do a lot of this. Obviously, you can go to lawyers, and they can help you with that. But there's a lot of information out there from banks, from accountants, from the legal system. And, of course, the investment firms, the insurance people are all trying to help you. But I think one thing that most people fail to do when they go to look at their planning is they don't look at the big picture. And we call it the what if. What if this happens? What if that happens? And, I always had a saying, we never change our mind based on what we know, but we will make new decisions based on new information. So now that we ask you that question, what if this were to happen? You say, well, I would do something different. So you have to put some thought into designating your beneficiaries, designating the way you want your estate to pass. And when you look at what passes, it's everything that you own. Your IRAs. IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account. Doesn't say joint, doesn't say spouse, it says individual. So you have to put a beneficiary in that. And a lot of times people will leave their IRA to their estate, and because it says my will take care of that. Well, the problem is the estate is not a living being.
Right.
It is actual separate entity, and it's taxed at a much higher tax rate. And a lot of people don't realize this, but unless you know exactly what you're doing, that estate ends up being the owner of that IRA, and that taxes on that as it's coming out is much higher than what it would be as an individual. And we find that most people are not even aware that you can actually get it out of the estate. You can create a trust to have it, the trust is created by the estate, but most people just leave it. A lot of people leave it to the estate. And again, we encourage you to get professional help. Do not do that if at all possible, because the tax implications and the issue of getting it out of the estate and back to his individual. There's only one firm that we know of that we can transfer money to at the estate, and they'll turn around and transfer it back to the individuals as the children. So if you have 2 or 3 children, even one, you want to get it out of that estate because of the tax implication. So it's very important. Of course, that also falls with your pension plans, your 401ks, anything that's got a beneficiary retirement-wise. You need to double check and make sure it passes on. So life insurance policies, we see this quite often, but people will buy life insurance on their children and they're the owner. Well, as they get older, they're going to could pass away before their children do.
Sure. And
they don't change the ownership. Well, you don't think of that being a beneficiary a lot of times, because you think, well, the beneficiary is going to pass it on to someone else because maybe they're the beneficiary. Well, they just increased the value of their estate and didn't realize it. And so it's better to get that life insurance policy out of the parent's name and into the children's name at some point in time, and make sure it doesn't stay in that estate if that's the goal. And again, there's the what if game. What if you get remarried? Again, guess what? The life insurance could belong to the new spouse.
Right.
New spouse, as the owner, can change the beneficiary to them. So the money goes to someone else besides your wife or husband and children. So you never want that to happen. So it's very important that you have someone look at those designations.
Another thing, talking about the life insurance thing, and I've seen this several times over my lifespan, that there's an estate that is heavy in real property. A lot of the assets are real property, and they have multiple children, and they have life insurance that's going to help fund the transfer of this property. Son number 1 and 2 are going to take the farm. Son number 3, daughter number 1 are going to take the
money.
Cash.
Yeah.
But I've seen people have it set up where the life insurance is paid normally within 4 to 6 weeks after the death, after you turn in the thing. And then by the time you get to settling the rest of the estate, they've spent that life insurance money, and the funding is not there anymore.
Right. So you're referring to a lot of times paying taxes through the estate, or some expenses or debt, things like that that's owed by the estate. And you're right, the money goes out before all the bills are paid, the taxes are paid, the transition
and
is
then the
paid.
family farm has to be sold.
Right, that's right. And you never want those things to happen. And so this, again, you bring up an extremely good point, because you just need help on making sure things happen on purpose. We're very big on that, because if it doesn't happen on purpose, someone's going to suffer. And I know sitting down with our clients and helping them plan, we always ask, what about Christmases and Thanksgivings? How do you want those to go?
Yeah.
Well, you want them to go good. Your whole life is thought of memories. So we don't want to mess up, our family memories, our history of telling those stories over and over. We've heard 42 times, but that will happen if we don't plan, and money does get in the way when it comes to family planning.
And I'm sure in your career that you've seen many of the close-knit families that were very close after the death of the parents. The controversy begins, and you got brothers not speaking to each other.
That's right. We've got a case right now. They hadn't talked with each other for 20 years.
Wow.
What a shame.
All right. We'll take a break and come back with more Life Planning 101 right after this on KTX KWBY. Segment 2 already, Life Planning 101. Great topic. Jim Kennedy with us.
Yes, sir. Yeah, let's go on with we talked about IRAs, we talked about life insurance. Another one's annuities. We see a lot of beneficiary designations on annuities. And again, you've got the owner, which owns the money. You have the annuitant, which is the person it's actually the annuity's written on. So it's based on your age. So if you could be the owner and the annuitant. Sometimes you'll have the annuitant someone else. And let's say, for instance, if you wanted to leave money to a church, the owner might be the church, the annuitant might be the member of the church. And then at death, the beneficiary could be the church. So They could use that as a way to gift money, but during the time that money is accumulating, there's no taxes paid. Of course, since the beneficiary is a church, there'd be no taxes on that. So you can use an annuity that way. But you need to check those ownerships, the beneficiaries, and the annuitant, and make sure it's set up properly. So again, money passes the way that you want it to, because annuities are not tax friendly at death. Someone's going to pay the taxes on it if it's not the spouse. So you've got to be careful with those, and you don't want it to go to the estate in a lot of cases. In some cases you do. But again, it's just a planning of what if this happens, what if that happens. So if we go back to your estate, let's say you have a son and daughter, and both of them are married, great spouses, no problems there, and everything's left to your daughter and son. And so at death, you expect everything to happen on purpose. It's going to go to your children, and then it's going to go on down to the grandchildren. But before death, sometimes our children might pass away. Well, now, then it end up going to the spouse, depending on how everything's set up. So you want to make sure that it's set up on purpose, because let's say it goes to that spouse, maybe the best daughter-in-law, best son-in-law in the world, and it's going to go right on down the grandkids, no problem. But then that spouse remarries, and then that spouse passes away. Then guess who has your money? And it's someone you didn't even know. Right. And they, a lot of times, will get power of attorneys. They can make changes, and it ends up not going down to your grandchildren, which is really what you wanted to happen, because you knew that your son or daughter would make sure it went there, and also maybe the children were underage, so it couldn't go directly to them without setting up a trust. So it's very important that you sit down and help get someone to help you plan out what you want to happen exactly. And we always say planning needs to take place at the beginning of time, so really all these seniors, what they need to go out and they need to have a will. We don't think about that, but they do have some assets. So, by law, it's going to pass by what Texas says how it passes. But one of the things that goes with those documents we don't think about is a power of attorney. In that power of attorney, they're 18 years of age. Well, you may, as a parent, you're no longer, able to sign for them. So you need to get that document signed, and also a medical power of attorney as we're talking about that. But all people need these legal documents in place so things pass, because as a beneficiary, it's going to pass by contract. And this is something that's pretty confusing, but if we have an IRA, we have a life insurance policy, an annuity, something with a designated beneficiary, 401k, it's going to pass by contract. If you do not have that named in there, it passes by will. Well, that means it's going to go through probate. So you're having to pay to have your money transferred. And so something as simple as going down to the bank and adding onto the bank that you want that to pass at death, is something that can be done without having to go through probate. Mm-hmm. So transfer on death. So again, we recommend getting help with that. Some of the banks are very helpful with it, very knowledgeable, but a lot of times they're not as knowledgeable as what we'd like to see them be, and they will just add you onto that account. Well, they add you on that account, then that creates other problems, because now you've got lawsuit problems, liability problems, and credit problems. Because you don't want to mess up your credit or mess someone else's up. So there's a lot more than just hearing, seeing, and thinking that you know what to do. Get the help, because you don't want to create those kind of problems for your family, yourself, or any one of your children or grandchildren. there's some things that you can put on there, like share and share alike or rights of survivorship. So that means if you have 3 children, for example, it's going to share 1/3 to each one of them. But if one of them were to pass away and say they had no other children, you might want a designation that says share and share alike. So if one passes away, now it's going to go 50-50 instead of 1/3 to each one of them. So that's set up from the beginning. You don't have to change it. But if they were to get married, again, you might want to change it and add per stirpes to it. So that way, if that one that passed away had children, the money would go down to blood, is what that means. But yeah, the next generation goes down to the kids and the grandkids, basically. So you could also name the estate of. So sometimes you need to put it in the estate of because there are no children. Maybe in your estate, you're going to leave everything to a charity. And that's a whole new can of worms. But a lot of times charitable planning can be planned way ahead of death. So if you're not going to leave anything to your children, do partially or some or all of your estate planning up front, because then you get the tax benefits now rather than getting no tax benefits at death. Because once you pass away, everything goes to charity. Other than estate tax being saved, there's no income tax advantage. So that's a good thing to do. So if you're trying to save taxes today, be proactive in the estate planning and the charitable planning. It's something we do a lot of and can take a lot of advantage of what the tax laws are, and it's a good time to do that.
Jim, another thing that we can't stress enough is you do your planning, don't forget it. Revisit it, because Angela and I talk about this quite often. I mean, every time you have an administration change at the White House, things are going to change.
Yeah, every 4 years.
Things are going to change. And, you do this planning back in the 80s, you think everything's good, or the 90s or the early 2000s. It's not relevant today. You got to change with the times, and you need to revisit those things periodically.
That's very true.
All right, we'll take our final break, come back with segment 3 right here of Life Planning 101 on KATX KWBY. Final segment, Life Planning 101 right here on KATX KWBY. Jim Kennedy's with us, and we're talking about how to pass your estate the most efficient way.
Right. And there's so many ways to do that, and there's no perfect scenario, but I have to tell you a lot of people wait till last minute to do their planning, and of course, learning a financial planning firm is kind of probably like your doctor or lawyer. We're the last ones to do our own planning sometimes, and so my wife decided she was going to do it. And even though she's not a licensed planner, she decided she would get the documents written and get them ready to take to the attorney's office. So she did. Angela actually read them and came in laughing hysterically. And my office, she said, "Well, Dad, you're out of luck. You're just you might as well just go ahead and find you another place, because Mom dies." Said, "Not only is the house gone, the farm's gone, but your bed's gone." So, so here's someone that's around it every day, and she didn't realize that she left me out. So I constantly remind her of that. So kind of a fun thing. But you know what? This happens too many times, and people wait till they're going to go on a trip and run down to the lawyer's office, run down and make some changes, and they didn't put a lot of thought into it. So we see this quite often when people have a business and or say a property, a land, assets, and they want to leave the property to one of the children because that child may be interested in it, with its business property or farms or big, huge, and ranches are huge issue, because usually most kids want to get away from the farm ranch. All they remember is working on it. They don't want to
baling hay.
That's right. So they want out of it. I mean, you might have one grandchild or one child that wants it, but so how do you equalize that? And I always say, if you held out your hands both directions, you say money in one hand, problem in the other. Money fixes most problems. So you can do that with cash. Where does the cash come from? Well, if it comes out of the estate, then that's part of theirs also. So life insurance is a big asset with helping to equalize those inheritances. But it's not as simple as that. You have to make sure that the child that wants the property really wants it, and the child that doesn't want it really doesn't want it. So we recommend sitting down and have a family meeting, and we help mitigate that and with the children and say, what is it you really want? What would you really like to have? What would you do if you received the property? Would you sell it? If it's a building, an office building, a commercial building, would you want to keep it and take care of it, or would you want to sell it? What's your wishes? And a lot of especially farmers and ranchers and business owners, they worked all their life. You have to think about what mom and dad's thinking. They worked all their life. They probably built it from scratch. They had to borrow, beg, and steal to get that business where it is today, and their legacy is to leave it to someone that loves it as much as they do. But do the children really love it? Do they really want to do it? Is it their passion? And sometimes it's a disappointing thing that the kids don't want it. You might have a grandchild that does, actually, though. So that grandchild comes in and says, I want to be a part of that. Well, how do you bypass your kids and leave it to the grandchild? And again, if the hand's in one money and the problem's in the other hand, then what you fix it with is money. And life insurance is a great tool to do that with, but you got to be careful. Where does the money go? And sometimes you have to create a trust and maybe have a trustee, so everything's done on purpose, and you're paying for someone to make sure the money's being used the appropriate way. And unfortunately, we're not all perfect. Not all of us have a business mind. Some of us have some habits that we wish we didn't have, and it may be drug and alcohol related. It may be divorces. We see it quite a bit where there's several divorces in the family. So a lot of planning can be done to help protect someone from themselves. So the money can go into a trust for the benefit of your children. So those children will get an income for life, and that is so important because now you've protected them from going out and spending it all. We've actually had people sit down at our table. I'll never forget when a man came in, brought his two sons, and told his son, said, "This is what I want you boys to do." And they said politely, "Yes, sir, we will do that." He died in a very few months after that. Immediately they came in, wanted all the money, and I said, "You remember your dad, what he said that you wanted to do?" And they said, I'll never forget these words, "Our dad didn't understand." And I remember saying, "Oh, I think your dad understood perfectly well." Yeah. And in a matter of less than a year, they had spent that whole inheritance. And it made me sick at my stomach, made my heart ache to know that I had failed our client by not recommending things, because he knew his boys. He just thought that they would listen to me because he told them to. But they weren't going to listen to anyone. Right. So a trustee, he's going to do what the will says. And you may not like what he says, but sometimes that's the best thing for you. So it protects you from lawsuits. It protects you from marriage. It protects you from bad habits, overspending. Many, many, many times, people that inherit money always say, if you've made that kind of money during your life and you inherit that money, you'll keep it in most cases. If you inherit money and you never made that much money, most likely you will not be able to keep it because it was too easy to get.
Burn a hole in your pocket.
Burn a hole in your pocket and it's gone. What a shame. So I just recommend that whatever you need in planning, get help. Don't try to do the job alone.
And there's not a cookie cutter firm that can, not everybody can be everything to what you need. I mean, you need specialty.
You need
advice.
You need help, and a lot of times that includes your attorney, because there's a lot of legal issues, and we recommend a lot of times a tax attorney, because there's more to it than just the leaving the money. It's the tax consequences of how they receive the money. So when they get it, how they get it, and what they're going to use it on is very important. So those questions need to be answered before you go the steps of setting all this up.
Lots of great information right here on Life Planning 101 on KATX, KWY. Tune in again on Saturday morning at 9 on both stations, and you can hear this again, of course, pick it up online, everywhere else. Lots of opportunities to hear all this great stuff. Thank you, Jim Kennedy.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for Life Planning 101, brought to you by Kennedy Financial Services of Eastland. Tune in every Monday morning at 8:30 on KATX and KWBY, and again on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock on KATX and KWBY for more Life Planning 101.
Advisory services offered through Smart Money Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Securities offered through Colton & Associates Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Kennedy Financial Services Incorporated is an independent of Colton & Associates Incorporated and Smart Money Group, LLC.